Hello, everybody. We are back, and today we're going to be talking about chapter 5, the first part of chapter 5, because kind of like chapter 4, I wanted to break it up and do a couple of digestible pieces. And we're going to be talking a lot in this part of chapter 5. We're moving on to the Renaissance and talking about Shakespeare. And then we're going to break down Hamlet, which is one of the plays that you have to read. So we're going to work on that and kind of break it down as well. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm also going to try to show you some videos, and I really hope they all come out because sometimes when I try to zoom these things, it doesn't always work, but we will see. All right. So the first thing we're doing is we're starting with the Renaissance, chapter 5. And there were some major changes in theater when the Renaissance happened. So if you remember, we went from Greek to Roman to nothing for like 500 years. And then we went into medieval theater. It started off in the church, and then it kind of went into the vernacular. Then people started doing the interludes in between, like banquets and things like that. And they were allowed to go out and now start their theaters being paid. And so we have acting again. So once this all starts happening, a ball starts rolling, and boom, we are in the Renaissance. We're going to start in England in the Renaissance. So at first they kind of went to a return to the Greek and the Roman classics. These plays were secular, so they were not religious. So first the church said, okay, we're going to do plays within the church. Then they said, okay, we're going to do plays outside the church, but you're going to do it about the church. And then they said, no, don't do it about the church. So now we're at non-religious plays. Excuse me. All right, so religious drama was actually outlawed. They didn't want you talking about the church anymore, so anything that you did had to be secular, which basically means not religious. And it was no longer supported by the church or the guilds. These were true professional theaters where people put the theater together. They may have had a Patreon, they may have had somebody that helped them out, but it wasn't assigned to them. It wasn't a duty to run the theater. These were people that were doing it on their own. There were professional actors and professional theaters, meaning that they chose this as a profession and they were paid to do so. Now, actors have typically not always been paid very well, but we like to scrape out a meager living. So companies were usually sponsored by kings or noblemen who really liked theater or who really liked the arts, and they would kind of give them the upfront money. They were kind of the producers. They would give them the money to get the theater started, but then they had to bring in ticket sales to keep the theater going. And some were more successful than others. So there was a transition from medieval to Elizabethan drama where actors became professional. And theater was no longer just during the festivals, but it was all the time. You could always go to the theater. You didn't have to wait for the Feast of Corpus Christi or, back in the Greek theater, the Dionysian festivals. You could go to the theater whenever you want, as long as there was a play going, right? The guilds tried to ban them. So remember, for a while, the guilds were running them. Now, the church has kind of, said, no, you can't do anything about the church. You can't do any religious drama. And the guilds who used to be in charge of them now tried to ban them. They said that they took people away from honest work. Actors were not really acting. They were not doing their duty. They should be out in the fields, growing corn or something. Certainly not acting and performing in plays. That theater tried to encourage immoral behavior. Theater spread diseases. I'm not sure exactly how, but theater spread diseases. Maybe, like we learned in COVID, everybody getting together in a confined space, but they didn't, try to outlaw, sports events. So I don't know, the theater spread diseases. And that it provided a cover for seditious activities. So sedition is when you're trying to undermine the government. So that really this was a cover for people there who were going and trying to destroy the government. And if they say something like that, well, then the government might step in and, try to ban it or something like that. But really the guilds were just trying to be political with it and trying to get people to work and not compete with what they had to offer. So actors, though, regain their status. Again, I told you there were sponsors for the theater, and there were a couple of different sponsors for Shakespeare's group himself. His group was called the Lord Chamberlain's Men because Lord Chamberlain was their patron. Okay, so this was his company. Shakespeare was actually the manager of a theater group, a theater troupe. We know that he wrote plays. We believed he actually performed in the plays, but we know for sure he was a real person who managed the troupe. Shakespeare's companies were the Lord Chamberlain's Men, and then later on, when James I became king, it was called the King's Men. So you might hear Shakespeare's companies referred to as the King's Men or the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Other prominent English playwrights. Shakespeare was not the only one that was writing during this time. There were a lot of people writing, and there were some very important people that were writing. The first is Christopher Marlowe. And Christopher Marlowe actually came up with what's called the mighty word, iambic pentameter, which is the style that Shakespeare wrote all of his plays. And the style of iambic pentameter, you've probably heard this in high school. It goes da-dun, 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 da-dun. There's an unstressed and then a stressed word. To be or not to be, that is the question. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks. Okay, bump, 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 bump. So Christopher Marlowe actually came up with this style. Unfortunately, there are not a whole lot of plays by Christopher Marlowe because he died when he was 27 years old in a bar brawl. So very sad story. You think this guy that came up with, this beautiful language piece ended up dying in a bar fight. So, but Christopher Marlowe is somebody to know. I want you to also think that's kind of people say, well, that's kind of a weird way to write. Why did they write that way? Well, they wrote that way for a couple of different reasons, but it was easier to memorize that. Sometimes even actors today sing their lines to try to memorize them. Sometimes it's easier to remember a song lyrics than it is to remember a paragraph. But the other very famous person that writes in a similar style is one that you've all heard before, and that's Dr. Seuss. So he actually writes in iambic quadrimeter. So iambic pentameter means unstressed and stressed, and pentameter means 5. So there's 5 of those. To be or not to be, that is the question. Iambic quadrimeter is 4. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, I am. So that's iambic quadrimeter as opposed to iambic pentameter. So still, it's something that we're actually familiar with. You just don't realize that you're familiar with it. Okay, another famous playwright of the time was Ben Jonson, and he also wrote several plays. He was very strong. He was a competitor of Shakespeare. John Fletcher and John Webster. So these are all very prominent English Renaissance playwrights. There is some question, and I'll go ahead and approach this now. People ask, was Shakespeare really Shakespeare? And yes, there was a person named Shakespeare. We know that he was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is the name of the town, in England. His father was a glove maker, and he went to school. Although we don't have, he went away, he went to college, but we're not even sure exactly. I don't think we have that he graduated from college. The reason that there is some question is Shakespeare really Shakespeare? Was because of the marvelous works that are done. Most people believe that Shakespeare worked in a group of actors, and that while they were acting, they would add and subtract lines and, do things a little bit differently, or sometimes different members of the group might write. And there are a lot of scholars who have done a lot of studies on, like, well, some of these plays are look like they're written by the same person, but this one looks really different and stuff like that. I saw a documentary that talked about how they looked for documents from Shakespeare's father, and the documents like to lease the glove shop or whatever were signed with an X, meaning that he was illiterate and didn't know how to read and write. Then, subsequent years later, they found documents from Shakespeare's daughter. He had a son, but he died at a young age. His name was Hamnet, so close to Hamlet, but not Hamlet. Hamnet. But then his daughter, they looked at documents that she signed, and she also signed with an X. And you think, illiterate, the most beautiful, best writer in the English language, and then illiterate, next generation. It's like, does that follow? It does make you think. Now we know kind of Shakespeare went away from people and maybe didn't keep in touch with people back home, but it is kind of a big stress and that stretch. And there is a theory that Bacon, Thomas Bacon, was the writer, because he's the one, he was a great mathematician. He did like ciphers, like spy things where he would write things into a book, and you if you didn't know, you couldn't figure out. They communicated a lot through that way. That's how spies communicated, was maybe through books, and they would, every 10th letter was the letter to a different word that you needed to put together to understand what the message was that they were doing and stuff like that. So the Baconian theory by Francis Bacon, I'm sorry, it wasn't Thomas Bacon, Francis Bacon, is that he was actually the writer of a lot of these works, and that he gave these plays to Shakespeare and had Shakespeare put his name on them, because Francis Bacon was nobility. And a lot of the plays make fun of nobility, and they're very political, and they slam nobility. And if he had been caught writing that kind of stuff, they could have, arrested him for sedition and, all those kinds of things. But if you gave it to this theater troupe and just let them produce it, then it wouldn't get back to him. So that's a theory. And just like all theories, we can't prove it. But just know that people talk about that Shakespeare, some people say Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare. And, there's some theories to that. But there was a real person named Shakespeare. We do know that. And he managed the theater company. We do know that. Now, and Thomas Kyd. Yes, Thomas Kyd was also another prominent English Renaissance writer. The Old Globe Theater. So this theater is a replica of the actual theater that Shakespeare's troupe performed in. It's actually like, I want to say 200 yards away from the original one, because the river has changed. And so the river would be right where it was. It would be on top of the water, but it burned down like twice. And somebody in the 1990s, an American actually, decided to rebuild this right near where the original Globe Theater was. And so now it's there, and it continuously draws audiences to it. But we needed plays. So they needed a lot of different plays when they were here at the theater where they were performing. Because think about it, it's not like they had a whole lot of movies to choose from. Now, when we go to the movies, we can choose from 17 different things that are showing. Back then you went, well, and still now, you go to the theater and you get to see what's there. If you want people to come back to your theater, they're not going to come back and see the same show. Maybe a few, diehards would, but you have to change your show up pretty regularly to get the audiences to come in and see the next show. So they did what was called a repertory theater. So they did several plays going at one time. One night they would do this, and then the next night they would do this, and then the next night they would do this, and then maybe they'd go back to the first one. But they had to keep doing a lot of shows, which is why we have a lot of work from Shakespeare's group, because they had to keep changing it up all the time. Some theaters actually changed what they performed daily. Most theaters added at least 2 new plays a month to their repertory theater. So they've got like these 7 plays going, and then they add 2 more. Now, okay, now we've got 9 plays going, and then they add 2 more. And maybe we'll go back to the first one and we'll show this again. But they had to have a lot of costumes and they had to have a lot of time. And they had to be able to memorize quickly, again, with the iambic pentameter that helped them memorize more quickly. All right, I'm going to try to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share, I want to share this video that is a really short video, and it shows what's going on at the Globe. So let me see if I can get this.
Behind me is Shakespeare's theatre, rebuilt recently, but it was originally constructed in the 17th century, and its name is the Globe, which comes from the expression everyone in the world is an actor. The conditions at the time when this would have been built were very different from the way actors work now. It was all done during the day because they didn't have enough money to afford candles to put on the plays at night. So there would have been far more interaction between the public and the actors. And in fact, the groundlings, which were the cheapest seats just under the open cover, they would shout at the actors and throw things at them if they didn't like the play. At the time as well, none of the actors were women because they weren't allowed to be in plays. And also the church was very critical of theatre. It called it the nest of the devil, and it was usually just outside the city walls because it wasn't really allowed in those days. It was seen as something very popular and affordable because, just as I said before, the cheapest seats could be afforded by everyone. So this is where the groundlings stand, and to come here, it's only £5 to see a play, and they say it's one of the best places, even though if it rains, umbrellas aren't allowed, so you're going to get wet. But they say it would have been the best place as well, because the audience participated, so you were right next to the actor's foot. You could see up his nose, and if he spat down at you, as I said, there's no umbrellas allowed, so it would have been a big problem. But this great participation, because the audience can see you, the actors, everybody's involved in the play, which makes kind of a difference from the typical West End play where everybody's in the dark. Here, you felt like you were really part of it.
The signs of the zodiac known as the heavens. There's a trapdoor in heaven as well, which is open at the moment. And you come down from heaven on me. It does look quite dangerous.
The Globe Theatre puts on plays mainly by Shakespeare, and they're pretty authentic, even down to the finest details, like the original 17th century underwear. So it's probably not that comfortable. And nowadays, we go and see a play, but back then, the most important thing was the acoustics. It was more important that you heard the play. And so wherever you sat, the more expensive seats were the ones that had the best sound. The stage represents 3 different elements. The top, with the zodiac signs that's painted blue, represents heaven or the sky. There's even a trapdoor you can come down from. And then the stage itself represents the earth, and there's a trapdoor to go underneath, which represents hell. This round shape kind of increases the sense of participation. The building itself, though, was hard to get permission for because, remember, in the 17th century, it had burned down twice. So to make this thatched kind of roof after the Great Fire of London was pretty tough to do. It took them 8 years to get permission, but they finally managed to go ahead with it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Not if it's a summer's day in London.
Okay, so now we're back. Okay, so now we're back. So that was the old Globe Theatre. Shakespeare's Globe Theater. This is another picture of the old Globe Theater, and these people down here are the groundlings. They have the cheapest seats. They were able to come right up to the stage, and you can see they're reaching on stage. They're touching people and stuff like that. So it was actually a thrust theater because you can see there's people on the side here, people in the front, and of course there are people on the other side. So it has three sides for people to view it. So that's called a thrust theater because remember, it's like you thrust your tongue out into the middle of the audience. So they're on three sides there. It seats about 1,500 to 500 standing and 1,000 sitting. So all these people here, they are all standing up throughout the whole play. And if you think about Hamlet, most people do a cutting of Hamlet, but Hamlet, if you did it in its entirety, is like 4 hours long. So that would have been, yeah, you probably have to stretch your legs quite a bit. I don't think I could stand certainly that long. But the groundlings were probably the people that were the poorest because they were the cheapest seats. And if you wanted to sit into the box in the gallery up here, you had to pay more. So the groundlings stood right next to the stage, and there was box seating specifically like this for nobles and well-to-dos and people who could afford it. And the balcony seating were for those who could not afford the box seats. There was open air lighting. There is no roof on here. So all shows had to happen during the day. And if it rained, everybody got wet, but the show still went on. Also, young boys played girls' roles. They didn't have women. Women were not allowed on stage, but they usually chose a young teenager to play the girls' roles because a lot of times their voices were higher and they looked, they weren't growing beards and things like that. And sometimes it was actually thought and said that they played better women than the women would have. Like, I know a lot of women that would beg to differ, but I guess they had their reasons to think that. So Shakespeare's unusual medium of poetry, again, the one that was created by Christopher Marlowe, was called iambic pentameter. And the most important element in his dialogue is figurative language. He actually developed many words that we use all the time. No one had ever said the word eyeball before him. And I think some of the reason why he came up with these things was so it would fit in a rhyme, right? Because he had to do the iambic pentameter and I didn't fit, so he needed another syllable, so he came out with eyeball. So I know that he invented the word eyeball. I'd heard that. And there are several other words that are attributed to Shakespeare. Hamlet, when we talk about Hamlet, Hamlet wore black. So I think that that's one of the questions that's asked for you. What color does Hamlet wear? Hamlet's wearing black. His mother asks him, why are you dressed like that? Why are you dressed like you're in mourning? He was dressed up like in mourning because his father just died. But he was in mourning for his father's death, and that's why he wears black. So let's talk a little bit about Hamlet. So let me go back. Let's talk about the story of Hamlet. Remember we talked about the point of attack of a play? So the point of attack here, what has happened already in the past before this play starts, is that Hamlet's father was named Hamlet, and he was the king, and he was in a fight with Fortinbras. This play, Hamlet, actually occurs in Denmark, and Fortinbras was the king of Norway. So way before this happened, they were in a fight. Hamlet's father won. Okay, so he defeated. And now I believe, I'm not sure if he killed the king of Norway, but the king of Norway's son is now the heir apparent. So that's important to remember towards the end of the play. So that took place before. Then Hamlet's father suddenly and mysteriously died. And nobody really knows exactly how or why he died. And so Hamlet's really sad because his father died. Hamlet was away at school. Hamlet was going to university, going away to school. He's college age, right? And he's mourning his father. He goes back to school, and suddenly he's called back to Denmark for his mother's wedding. And it hasn't even been 2 months since his father died. Not only that, his mother is marrying his father's brother, Claudius, his uncle. So Hamlet's pretty disgusted by this. He shows up, he's trying to be a good son, he's there, but he is definitely not happy about this. Now, right before Hamlet gets there, well, when we open the play, we are in the middle of the night. The guards are outside and they are changing guards, and they're kind of spooked because one of them tells the other one, uh, there was a ghost last night, and I don't know if it's going to come back again tonight, but I know I saw a ghost. And the other one's like, yeah, right, sure. And they're like, well, let's bring Hamlet's friend, Marcellus, happens to be there. And he says, okay, I'll wait with you, and you show me this ghost. Well, they see it. They see this ghost together, and it looks a whole lot like Hamlet's dad, the king that had just died, but it won't talk to them and it won't say anything to them. Okay. So then the next scene, we are at the wedding feast for the uncle and the mother. And Hamlet is there basically wanting to just sink into the ground. You know, there's those times where you go, I just wish the earth would swallow me up right now. Well, he has a very famous speech there. First of all, his mother comes and tells him, why are you dressed all in black? You're supposed to be festive with us. And he's like, yeah. Okay. He's like, the uncle comes and tells him, I know your father died, but his father died and his father died and so on and so on. And get over it and move on. And he's like mortified. And so he's like, okay, yeah. And they said, don't go back to school. Come stay and be with us. And he's like, okay, fine. He doesn't know what to do. And, of course, there's in the middle of the court and there are all these people there. And his famous soliloquy there is, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt. Basically he's asking for his skin to melt off and that it turns into dew and gets absorbed up into the air because he just doesn't even want to be there anymore. Okay, so he's like, again, mortified. Then his friend comes in, Marcellus, and says, hey, Hamlet, good to see you. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. This is weird. It looks like they provided the feast for the wedding with the leftovers from the funeral. So Marcellus is like, yeah, it's a weird situation, but I really want to talk to you about this other thing because, we saw this ghost last night and he looks an awful lot like your dad who just died. And Hamlet's like, okay, that's weird. I'll come out with you tonight. So Hamlet goes out. They see the ghost. It seems to beckon Hamlet. Hamlet goes over and has this conversation with the ghost. Now, nobody else can be around and nobody else hears this but Hamlet. So there's the question, did Hamlet actually hear this or was it all in his head? Well, the ghost king tells him, I can't rest. I can't go to heaven because my murderer is still out there. And he's like, okay. And he goes, Hamlet, I need you to avenge my murder. And he says, well, who killed you? He said, my brother Claudius. And this is how he did it. I was asleep in the garden, as is my custom. I usually just go out there and take a nap. And I was sleeping in the garden, and he came and poured poison in my ear. So think about it. When they're doing autopsies back in those days, they look to see if anything's ingested. They might look in the stomach or they might look in the mouth to see if anyone was poisoned. They're not going to be looking in someone's ear. So it was kind of like the perfect plan, right? So it goes into his ear and poisons him and he dies. And Hamlet's like, okay. And he goes, all right. He's like, I'm not going to rest until you go ahead and kill Claudius. And Hamlet's like, all right, this is my life's duty now. But again, Hamlet is very indecisive because he doesn't know if he's going crazy or if that really happened. So Hamlet comes back and decides that he is going to pretend that he's crazy. And that way People won't know, like if he shows up at places where he's not supposed to be, they're going to think, well, that's just because he's kind of crazy. Hamlet has a girlfriend named Ophelia. And Ophelia has a brother named Laertes. It gets a little confusing. But so there's Gertrude, who's the mother, who married Claudius, who's the father. And then there's Hamlet, who's Gertrude's son, and the dead king. Attached over here, we have Ophelia, who's Hamlet's girlfriend, her brother, who's Laertes, and their father's name is Polonius. Polonius is the aged, wise assistant to the king. So he's nobility, he's up there, he's the king's right-hand man. And so it's kind of, all right, it's pretty obvious that Hamlet and Ophelia should be together. And Hamlet has told Ophelia that she loves him. And so her father, Polonius, is saying, okay, but this is his little girl. So he's like, all right, well, don't rush to things because he doesn't want his daughter to be used. And she's like, yeah, I'll be fine. Well, when Hamlet decides to go crazy, he also spurns Ophelia. So she's like, what's going on? And he's like, oh, come here. No, go away, I hate you. No, come here. No, go away, I hate you. And it's very confusing to her. Her brother Laertes has gone off. He went back to college. He was a college buddy of Hamlet's, right? He went back to college. And so Ophelia is just confused and doesn't know what's going on. Hamlet at one point tells her, I never loved you, and get thee to a nunnery. Well, a nunnery isn't a nunnery. It isn't a convent. A nunnery is a brothel. A nunnery is a place where prostitutes go. So basically, he's calling her a hoe. And he's telling her, go away, you're just throwing yourself at me. And she's like, I never did know. I loved you. And he's like, no, you slut, go away from me. So this being crazy thing is, it's really messing up other people. Meanwhile, Hamlet says, okay, how am I going to make sure, I might be telling these things out of order, but basically these are the things that happen in Hamlet. How am I going to make sure that Claudius really did this? And his friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, are come from school. And the king says, I'm glad you're here. Hamlet's acting a little crazy. Why don't you take him out and keep an eye on him, but, make sure he's having a good time. They decide to take him out to go see a play. He gets an idea. He says, I'm going to hire these people to come and do a play at the palace. But it's a play I'm going to write. And the play I'm going to write is going to have one of them poison a king who's taking a nap in the garden. And he says, and therein, when that happens, he's going to be looking at Claudius. And if Claudius looks nervous, then he knows that this is what he did. And so he says, therein I'll catch the conscience of the king. So he stages this play within a play. And he goes on, he has a great monologue about how he tells the actors how to act and tells them that they shouldn't wave their arms around and slice in the air, and that they, should make sure that they remember their lines the way they're supposed to and don't turn their back to the audience, and tells them all the things that the real Shakespeare would have probably told his actors. So it's kind of funny for us theater people to see it. They go ahead and they do the play. He watches Claudius. When they get to that part where the poison gets poured in the ear, Claudius freaks out and leaves. Okay, Hamlet's like, aha, I caught him. Now I know what this is. The play is over, and Polonius knows that Hamlet's been acting really weird. And so he goes and he's trying to sneak around and find out what Hamlet's doing and what Hamlet's saying. So Hamlet goes to talk to his mother in her room, right? And Polonius is sneaking around, kind of hiding behind the drapes, listening to their conversation. And basically, this is when Hamlet says, "Frailty, thy name is woman." Basically, Mom, couldn't you wait? It's only been 2 months. My father's hardly cold in the ground, and here you are marrying his brother. It's not even just anybody, it's his brother, right? And who should have been the king, by the way? Once the king dies, doesn't the son become the king? So Claudius has stepped in here in front of Hamlet as well. So basically, he's mad at his mom, who's just kind of like, well, I don't know. And he sees somebody move behind the curtain. So he says, aha, the jerk Claudius is behind the curtain listening to me. And he takes out his dagger and he stabs whoever is behind the curtain. And it's not Claudius, it's Polonius, his girlfriend's dad. Okay. So by now, Claudia is like, or I'm sorry, Ophelia is really messed up because Hamlet's rejecting her. Her brother's gone away. And now the person that she loves just killed her dad. So it's really messed her up. Meanwhile, Claudius, he goes and he finds Claudius, and Claudius is kneeling and he looks like he's praying. And Hamlet has the opportunity to kill him then, but he doesn't because he thinks, oh no, he's praying. And if he's praying, then he's going to go to heaven when I kill him, and I don't want him to go to heaven. It turns out that Claudius isn't really praying. He can't pray. He's kneeling down and he's thinking about it. And he's like, I can't even come up with the words. I can't pray. I don't, whatever. So he could have killed him and he could have been doomed. All right. So now Polonius is dead. Hamlet's acting cray cray, and nobody really knows what's going on. Hamlet, Claudius tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, look, take Hamlet away. Take him over to England for a little while. Here's a note to give to the King of England when you get there. And the note basically says to kill Hamlet. All right. So Hamlet leaves with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, somehow intercepts the letter and changes it, comes back without them, and all you hear later is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. So somehow he twisted it around so that when the king got the letter, he killed them instead. Hamlet comes back. Before Hamlet comes back, Ophelia just takes it off the deep end. She goes around and hands flowers to everybody, and they all mean something different to the different people in the court. And then she goes out and basically jumps into the river and lets her very heavy garments drag her to the bottom and drowns herself. Okay, so Hamlet comes back and finds that Ophelia died. And he didn't really mean that to happen. You know, he was trying to act crazy and everything, but he really still cared about Ophelia. So, but he doesn't even know Ophelia is dead yet. He goes out and he sees the people in the graveyard digging a new grave. And that's where the whole famous skull scene is, where he picks up the skull and he realizes that it's Yorick. And Yorick was kind of the fool when he was growing up. He was like the person who was supposed to keep the children occupied and kind of like his male nursemaid. You know, he was the one that was the amuser. He was the one that that Hamlet has very fond memories of Yorick and playing with him when he was little and stuff like that. So that's the whole, alas, poor York. I knew him well, Horatio. You know, he was a friend of mine, and here we are digging up his grave accidentally. And then it's kind of a, by the way, whose grave are you digging? And it's Ophelia. So the story's getting a little convoluted in my mind, but basically, he kind of freaks out. They have the funeral. He's at the funeral. He says, I can't stand it anymore. He jumps into the grave to be with her one last time. Okay. Right around this time, Laertes comes back and says, you jerk, you're the one that, you killed my father and you're the reason that she's dead and I'm going to kill you. And they start fighting in the grave over Ophelia. The king's there and he's like, hey, everybody cut it out. let's settle this like real men. Let's go have a duel. And he pulls Laertes aside and says, I'm going to give you some poison to put on your blade. So even if you just nick Hamlet, he'll die. And Laertes says, I'm on. All right, I'm with it, because he's so pissed off at Hamlet. So they set up the duel, and they start fighting, and sure enough, Hamlet gets sliced. But the king, by the way, he really wants to make sure that Hamlet's dead. So if Hamlet survives all this, he's got a cup prepared to toast him and give to Hamlet to celebrate, and the cup has poison in it. Okay, so we got this set up. There's this poison cup here, the guy with the sword. So they fight. Sure enough, he gets sliced. Somehow the swords get knocked down and dropped, and Hamlet picks up Laertes' sword and gets him with it. And Laertes is like, oh no, I'm gonna die. And he's like, I barely nicked you. And he's like, no, so are you. And he kind of confesses, look, the king had me put poison on the blade. And meanwhile, during the fight, Gertrude, Hamlet's mom, gets thirsty, sees the cup there, picks it up as the king's going, no, drinks it, mom dies. Hamlet's pretty pissed off by now. He's starting to feel the pain. He takes that poison blade. He makes Claudius drink the rest of the drink. And then he also stabs him through with the poison blade. So if he doesn't die with, drinking the poison and the poison on the blade, he's going to die from the wound from, stabbing him through. So yes, a tragedy is where everybody dies. At the end, his best friend Horatio comes up to him and says, oh my gosh, I want to die too, because I can't live with all of this. And he says, no, Horatio, somebody's got to live and tell the tale. You have to live and tell the tale. And as he's dying, the young Fortinbras, like the young Hamlet, comes in to take over Denmark. And Horatio's like, I guess it's yours. So Fortinbras is taking this over. So that's your basic story of Hamlet. So let's talk a little bit about it here now. All right, so this is a picture of the play within a play. These actors are wearing masks. The king is there, and this one's pouring poison in the king's ear. And this is where we're supposed to catch the conscience of the king. Okay, so Claudius, King Hamlet's brother, kills Hamlet's father, King Hamlet, while he's sleeping in the garden, and he pours poison in his ear. Claudius then marries Gertrude, Hamlet's mother. The inciting incident is that King Hamlet's ghost appears to Hamlet and tells him to avenge his murderer. Claudius acts guilty when he sees the play because he knows that Hamlet knows what he did. It's like, uh-oh, this is Claudius up here going, oh, wait a minute. That's what I did. Ophelia passes out flowers to several people and then drowns herself. And she lost it because Hamlet came on to her and then rejected her several times. Very confusing, to her, get thee to a nunnery. And he killed her father, although he didn't mean to kill her father because he thought it was Claudius, but she doesn't know that. She just knows that her father's dead and that Hamlet was responsible. Okay. And then the tragic ending. Laertes cuts Hamlet with the poisoned sword. Hamlet then manages to wound Laertes with the same sword, poisoning him as well. Gertrude drinks the poison cup intended for Hamlet by Claudius. Laertes tells Hamlet that Claudius set it all up, and then Hamlet makes Claudius drink the rest of the poison, then finishes him off with the poison blade. So the sword wound, the poison from the sword, and poison from the cup should kill Claudius. Waste. Sorry. Here's the flow chart, right? So we have Hamlet Sr., the ghost, married to Gertrude the queen, and then Gertrude the queen is also married to Claudius the king, and Claudius kills Hamlet Sr., and Claudius and Hamlet are brothers. Hamlet Jr. is the prince from Hamlet and Gertrude. His friend is Horatio, who's the first one to see the ghost. And then Marcellus and Bernardo, those are just the guards that also see ghost of Hamlet. Hamlet is in Denmark and Fortinbras is in Norway. And Hamlet defeats old Fortinbras in a battle. And then he dies, and his son, young Fortinbras, is the one that comes back and he wants the land back from Denmark. All right, we're back to Hamlet over here. His childhood friends are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They really work for Claudius. They spy on Hamlet. And then Hamlet is dating Ophelia. Ophelia's father is Polonius, who is the advisor to the king. And Rinaldo is the advisor to Polonius. He is also sent to spy on Laertes, but that's another little side thing. Ophelia and Laertes are brother and sister. And then there's some other grave diggers and courtiers in the place. But basically, that's all the people. And then here's the other little flow chart. Okay, Claudius, the king of Hamlet, was his dad. Now it's his stepfather and his nephew and Queen Gertrude. And okay, so there, and there's York's skull. Okay, so Hamlet is considered one of the most difficult roles to play, in part because the actor must project one set of attitudes and responses to all the other characters in the play because he's trying to make them think he's crazy. And then to the audience, he's actually going through the sanity and explaining why he's doing what he's doing. So he kind of has to go back and forth between these personas. So it's thought to be a very, very difficult role to play. There are questions of interpretation for the actors playing the character of Hamlet are, does Hamlet feign madness? Is he pretending to be mad in Acts 2 and 3? Or for a time, does he actually go insane? Because we're really not sure at some of the times. What are Hamlet's feelings towards his mother? I mean, he's pissed off at her, but does he love her also? You know, is he confused by her? And why does Hamlet wait so long? Why does he delay so long in avenging his father's murder? If he really believed that the ghost was telling him what was true, why didn't he just go kill Claudius right out? And nobody would have blamed him. And then he would be king anyway, so he could forgive himself, right? So which of the events show the theme of betrayal in Hamlet? So betrayal. His father has been murdered by his uncle. That's a betrayal. His mother has been unfaithful to his father by not even mourning his death. Okay. His mother has accepted the uncle usurping him and stepping basically in front of her son to be king as the throne that should have been Hamlet's. And his friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, have become his uncle's spies. And these are people that he knew like his whole time growing up and went away to school with. And yeah, messed up, man. Okay, I have some videos that I want to show you here. If you want to go and look, I'm not going to show you all of them, but if you want to go and look, you can see them on the PowerPoint, and you can click on them and see them from there. I'm hoping that this comes through. So, did I stop sharing? I think I stopped sharing. Okay, and now I'm going to try to share. This is 3 different people doing Hamlet's to be or not to be scene. So that you can see how different people do it differently. And to be or not to be, by the way, means, do I want to live or do I want to die? Because he's so confused with all of the things that are going on.
Be or not to be. To be or not to be. To be. Or not to be. That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, by opposing end them, to die. Asleep. No more.
By sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to.
It's a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub.
For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause.
There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life.
For who would bear the whips and scorns of time?
The oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes.
He himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin. Who would these fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but for the dread of something after death?
The undiscovered country from whose born our traveler returns. Seems the will.
And makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others we know not of.
Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all.
And thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought.
Enterprises of great pitch and moment, in this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action.
Oops. Okay. So quickly, just breaking that down for you. To be or not to be, that's the question. Should I be alive? Or should I be dead? Because this is driving me nuts. He's absolutely going crazy. I can't handle all of this. Is it more noble, he's saying, to suffer everything that's coming at me, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? This is an outrageous thing that's happening, not in a good way, right? Is it more noble for me to stand here and suffer it, or to go away, to sleep that you never wake up from? And then he says, but wait a minute, if I do that sleep, maybe I'll dream, but what kind of things do you dream when you're dead? Nobody's ever come back from being dead and being able to tell us about it. And that's what makes cowards of us all. We're afraid. Otherwise, why would we even live? With all the horrible things that happen to us all the time, why would anybody stay alive? Okay, so it's because we're afraid. We're afraid that we don't know what's going to happen after death. We don't know if we're going to sleep. We don't know if we're going to be tormented. And so we just live as cowards. So that's kind of what that whole thing is saying. I want to show you another thing just because I think it's quite funny. This is 1 minute Hamlet.
Due to MTV's recent acquisition of PBS, this evening's 3-hour performance of Hamlet has been reduced to 1 minute.
James, did you hear that? What? 1 minute. Oh. To be or not to be,
That is the question. It seems I'm going mad, losing my discretion. Seems nay it is, I know not seems, to wake or to sleep, perchance to dream.
There's something rotten in the state of Denmark. It's midnight at the castle Elsinore with a hark.
Who's your brother-in-law? Who's your brother-in-law? Yo, Mom, that's my uncle. Get off my dad's grave. Son, I've been unnaturally murdered on Crookshanks spine. Time is out of joint. I've got to set it right. I must avenge my father and kill Claudius. I'm gonna start by acting nuts and talking to the audience. I never loved thee, go get thee to a nunnery. Hey, nonny, nonny, and a nonny, nonny, hey, gather round everybody for a play within a play. I poison you! I be illin! You're smiling. I'm smiling? You must be a villain. He didn't kill your dad. Not that we'd admit it. I know she's my mom, but she's hot. I want to hit it. This curtain really makes me want to do something erroneous. This isn't who I meant to kill. This is Polonius. Gentle Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, pin this note on Hamlet's pen, and you'll get killed in turn. Sorry. To be or not to be, that is the question. It seems I'm going mad, losing my discretion.
Yo, Hamlet, we already heard those lines. Just cut to the part where everyone starts dying.
Alas, poor Yorick. Oh my God, Ophelia's dead. This might be my last chance to get her in bed.
Hamlet, you scoundrel, that's my sister you're bopping.
On the grand duel, right here by the coffin. First, just let me poison this cup.
Yo, what is up now, Hamlet?
What up?
I'm going to kill you with this poison sword of mine.
You will.
Yeah.
Fine. Ow, now it's on. You're going to get stuck.
It's Hamlet.
Drink it. Oh no. That poison was meant for you. Now you killed my mom. It's time to do this. I've waited way too long. Good God, I've been bled.
Poisonous friend.
I'm dying.
You're dead.
The flights of angels sing thee to thy ditch. A foreign broad in Norway taking over this bitch.
You heard?
I want to make sure to show the credits. Always show the credits. Okay. So here are some actual videos. You can, again, open the PowerPoint and look at these if you want. Actually, Hamlet in 4 minutes actually explained. That was the 1 minute Hamlet rap that you just saw. And then there's Hamlet in 7 minutes. It's the Fresh Prince of Denmark instead of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's kind of silly. So those are the summary videos. Oh, and the end. Okay. So thank you guys very much. I hope you learned a little bit about Hamlet. I hope you'll hope a little bit about Shakespeare and Renaissance England. And we will see you next time. Take care.